Hey everyone, welcome to the Beauty in Between podcast. I'm Gabe, and this is Katie. Say hi, Kate.
Hello, everyone.
And yeah, just before getting into today's topic, we appreciate all of y'all joining us. How's your week been so far, Katie?
Well, it's been good. Still on the upward trend health wise. As you know, I've also
Hmm.
been eating, living, and breathing Olympics,
Yeah,
which has been so fun. It's been fun to watch.
we're like a
Also,
sports
for
bar in
those
the
of
house right
you,
now.
yeah, for those of you who are watching on video, you have a little gift that is this tiny little duckling that's sitting in frame that a friend of mine gave me. So I'm also excited about having this duck. But yeah, it's been a good week, not too hectic, and honestly, it's just there. The Olympics is a strangely also polarizing topic, which is not what we're talking about today. But I do want to say that just watching human beings do what they've been training to do for a lot of them, essentially the culmination of their whole lives is performing at the Olympics, and like really intentionally the last 4 years of training. It's so cool to watch athletes like do their thing. It's so insane. So that's been fun. What about you, Gabe? How's your week been?
Yeah, I mean, I've been enjoying watching some of the the Olympics tennis. I never really was a huge watcher of tennis when I was growing up, even though I played it for, like since I was 4 to 16. Um, But yeah, I've been enjoying it. And it's fun to watch it and like actually like not have too much stress on like I'm trying to pay attention to how people are doing things, but just being able to sit back and enjoy the points, being you know kind of loving the sport that I used to play. Um, and yeah, other than
You've
that, I
been
mean
explaining it to me.
we're over sickness. We're looking forward to the next week. Uh, we are going to go on a trip to New Mexico pretty soon, so we are definitely like
Oh,
a little bit
right.
excited for that.
Also,
Uh
wait,
huh.
I missed something very important because we are recording early on in the month of August. Welcome to my birthday month, everybody. My birthday is on August 14th, which is the day before one of our episodes will come out. I celebrate the entire month of August because the entire month of August is, in fact, my birthday month. So, welcome. I hope everyone has a great my birthday month.
Yes.
An excellent transition is that so our topic today will not be the Olympic Games, but we are covering a different type of gaming. We're going to talk about something that I am super excited to get into Gabe's brain a little bit. So, sort of question of like, is gaming toxic? Slash, should we just burn down the whole world of gaming? Um, is there anything positive that can come out of it? We're basically just going to be talking about
It's not
gaming.
all. It's also like why is it fun? Things like that.
So we're going to talk about just gaming culture today overall, and to give y'all a little idea of how this conversation is probably going to go. Gabe does game. He is a gamer, and we have a whole little group that we'll talk about who sometimes we connect via games, and at the same time gaming culture is so frustrating to me personally because it's
Okay.
problematic for different reasons. But that being said, Gabe, could you just talk to us a little bit about giving us an overview of gaming culture? Like, how would you just describe the sort of landscape of it?
So I would say it's a little bit volatile because you have a bunch of different sectors. Like, you have your people that are through and through. Like, I'm an Animal Crossing, Pokemon person. Like, I want a chill game that I can enjoy and like I don't have to stress. Just fun, good music. And then there are those who are like hardcore FPS or first person shooter players. They're like, I was born to aim. And I'm gonna win this game. And those people, want to play a single player game. They're like, yeah, I strategize, but it's just me. So there are a couple different spots. I mean, you primarily hear from that FPS kind of competitive gaming side where there are people who love to compete. That's kind of where I found myself for a while too, um, with some certain games like Overwatch, League of Legends, Dota, um, just to name a few, CS:GO, Rocket League. Like these are kind of those competitive games that people love to like get soaked into. And so that side of it is like a much larger part of it, or a much more vocal side, because you have people talking in games and all this stuff and talking trash to one another. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but that is a side that's very loud. and quite often can be toxic due to that competitive nature and just overall, some of those people, they might not have an easy time socially. And so they come to games to kind of like get out everything. And it can be like quite an unhealthy environment
Hmm.
because of that. So that's kind of like, what most people see and what most people hear, I'd say.
Yeah. And okay, so as an example, I know that you don't play this game as much. The creators have sort of tanked the game. It's a whole other thing. But when we started dating, you were still pretty actively playing Overwatch
Hmm.
or Overwatch 2. I don't remember. Overwatch is not my game. It's basically teams and there's shooting involved. For those of you who maybe don't know, that's my description of it. But like Overwatch. And I
Hmm.
remember that you showed me different Overwatch players who are, some of them are really popular for streaming that particular game and are also radically toxic. And I remember a conversation that we had early on was that it bothered me a little bit. I got over it, sort of. But it bothered me that you participated in the ecosystem of Overwatch, not because you were toxic, but because you were participating in something that like is perpetuating sort of
Hmm.
the other toxic members and things. So I don't exactly know what the question is, but something about like how is it that there are humans who it's possible to play the same game where there are also streamers or players of the game or whatever who are just radically toxic. How do we not just boycott the whole thing? Because I think that was my energy at the time of why are we not just boycotting all of it because it's a
Yeah.
problem.
And it's been a thing for quite a while. I mean, even, back in the olden days whenever we were playing Halo or I don't even remember like Call of Duty, a
That
lot
was
of
my
trash
jam.
talking and stuff like that. Very interesting environment to like grow up in a way. Um, but yeah, I think like with today's culture with that, there are efforts to try to change it with like different like inclusive tournaments and stuff like that. Because historically, like women have had a hard time within the gaming culture.
Yeah.
Because there's like a certain thing, that goes around with a lot of men where they're like, oh, this is what a woman should be doing. And they might blame
Ugh.
like a performance as, oh, she's a woman or, oh, you
Yeah,
should play
gaming
this
culture is
specific character.
incredibly misogynistic,
Yeah.
sexist, racist. It's pretty much a breeding ground for all the isms.
Yeah. So definitely like a lot of those things, like racism and misogyny side of things, there's just those people are all kind of like functioning on an island. I think a good way to interact it, or the way that I've kind of taken, is like I want to help others, play well and stuff like that and succeed. And so I try to take a positive approach of like, whether it's like I want to be a part of strategizing and be like a vocal person, and ask for different things like, hey, this would be a great if you switch to so and so character or did so and so thing in the game.
Yeah,
Um,
you kind of turn into an e-coach. I've heard it.
yeah, and so and I've actually like coached my own little amateur team before. It sounds
Oh,
super nerdy, but
right.
I did it for like a year or so. Or actually, no, I guess it was like almost 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a fun thing. I mostly had like, you know, teens or like preteens who were playing with me. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just in college at the time, but had these guys, that were like 3 to 5 years younger than me and stuff. And the fun thing with them was just being able to see them mature over time, especially with having this responsibility in a team where like other people are depending on them. And, there are different things that they have to learn, like how to depend on somebody else for things as well. And being able
Oh.
to effectively communicate without, just breaking out in an all-out war. And so I really love that part of things, and that's still something that I like strive to do with some of the people that I play with. Because like overall, if you come into it with a bad attitude, you're gonna come out of it with a bad attitude most likely. No matter whether you like win a little bit or lose a little bit, it's all just tough. So
Well, and I
yeah.
could sit here all day because I feel like it's pretty easy to talk about the glaring, glaring negatives of gaming culture. Like, for those of you who don't know, because I didn't know this for the majority of my life, there is a piece of gaming culture where people were calling SWAT teams on
Oh yeah, for
streamers,
streamers and
and
such.
like they would be on stream and a SWAT team would show up just because it was like a prank. I don't know. I don't really know why it was happening.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
the fact
basically
that
it was.
that's a thing that happens, and I think it still happens. The fact
Hmm.
that like it's a thing at all that's happened more than once, that is highly problematic. So we could circle back to the problematic sides because it's not that hard to find. But I mean, at the core, there's also like, if we talk a little bit about the history of video games specifically, right? Like go way back in the day to Atari and just Pong, and the way that Nintendo kind of capitalized on the idea of sort of party gaming, and Nintendo games often
Hmm.
are sort of meant to be played in person, party game, play Mario Kart, Super Smash Bros, whatever. Um there's sort of like this positive piece that I grew up with, a lot of it, of before Wi-Fi, actually, that gaming at some point was a way to hang out with your friends, have all these different experiences across all these different games. I mean, and it was fun to trade off and things like that. But then we enter into the world of matchmaking gaming that I grew up in. I was a teenager when Halo matchmaking and COD was
Hmm.
a thing. And I have memories of there being 8-year-olds on the comms, and it was the weirdest thing. Like you had people who were full grown adults,
Hmm.
teenagers, and little children all playing this game, and some taking it way too seriously. But at the time, pro gaming wasn't really a thing that existed. And then from there to now, we sort of had this double down effect. And I'm saying all of this from experience because I've watched it
Yeah.
happen. I didn't go out and research the history of gaming before this. But like from then, of because I have really strong memories of Halo matchmaking gaming sessions with my friends or whatever, that we would just be in our little party, and it was just a fun, like we would leave school and be like, okay, see you in Halo in a couple hours after we do our homework, sort of thing. And that was always really fun. But at some point, gaming, I'm not going to say that it took a turn, but at some point it got more extreme. Like with Twitch streaming being a thing, and people actually just wanting to watch streamers play a game, much less the general skill, I think, went up, and the sort of obsessive levels went up as well. But all that being said, there's like some root of positivity. I mean, I both played games and sort of play some games now
Hmm.
sometimes. So let's go back to the heart for a second, of like what is the positive side? What is the reason of playing games to begin with?
So I think what happens is, and even talking about the kind of like way that's evolved over time,
Mm-hmm.
but there's like always been that toxicity there in some sense. And I mean, even if you're somebody who's playing Monopoly, sometimes get frustrated and be like, this game is stupid,
Sure.
and have certain emotional or even physical reactions.
Sure.
I was a pretty competitive, or I've always been a pretty competitive person, but I was a
Monopoly is not
sore
my game.
loser when I was a kid. My parents were like, "We're not going to trade with you." But anyways, childhood memories aside, it
Sure.
has changed in that way of, more people have access to it now. Like even if you go to, different third world countries, sometimes they'll even have, PC cafes in a way. They're like, hey, you can come over here and play
Right.
some PlayStation or some Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
And majority of people have a console in their home now. It'd be interesting to look at the statistics of that. But even thinking about that, and so it's
Mm-hmm.
become much more mainstream, and popularized, but still the same things are there of the toxicity and stuff. And now you just have a much larger crowd. And with the larger crowd too, like everybody wants to be the best. And so a lot of people come to it to kind of satisfy that competitive nature. But also in general, people just like to have fun. Sometimes, like I mentioned, for those single player people that are, kind of playing in their own world, they get to kind of escape from their world and kind of forget things for a little bit. Um, so it
Mm-hmm.
feels like a safe place. And for those competitive games, those people also love it because it gives such a it's a large dopamine response. And so when they're playing these games, like what they might it might really hurt on a loss, but when you get that competitive win, you feel like you're putting everything in. Like, oh man, it feels so good. I want to reach that again. Gaming is something that can give that on an almost like daily occurrence. But there are tons of different people that come into it. Like some of these people are, teenagers who are able to play a lot during the summer. Some of them are adults who that's their like main hobby. And some of them are, guys that just came back from working a 9 to 5 and they get to play for an hour or two. Like there's so many different people that come into it with such different profiles. But that's one way that people can enjoy it or why they desire to play it, I'd say.
Yeah, and you just reminded me of something that we know a couple of different people, and I know a couple of people who they are a parent with maybe a younger teen or just a teenager in general, or they have a kid.
Hmm.
And something that I think is so fun are the friends of ours who they're a parent and they have kids old enough to play certain games, and they hop online with them. And
Hmm.
sometimes, thinking of one friend of ours, sometimes the parent is better than the kid, which is hilarious. Which I feel like it's so interesting because I feel like in those contexts, that degree of bonding and the opportunity for an adult or a parent to sort of step into their kid's world is so impactful
Hmm.
and is super fun. And I don't have memories of either of my parents ever like playing a matchmaking game with me, but I do have memories of my parents, both of them, playing games with me,
Hmm.
like in our living room or like playing a video game. Or like I remember when I was playing the Assassin's Creed games, my mom didn't play those with me, but I would give her a play by play of every time that I played. I would be like, this is what's going on in the story. So my mom knew who Ezio was and like
Hmm.
cared about the world of Assassin's Creed because I was explaining it to her. So you are reminding me that there's this cool connection that can happen within the world of video games. And there's
Hmm.
even a group of friends of ours who there was a point where we were all in Austin, but now we're kind of scattered. And one way that we stay connected with those friends is we play Fortnite together,
Yeah.
and those are fun sessions. So I guess what I would be interested to hear more of your take on is what is like the tension or the line between healthy, helpful, you know, almost protected escapism of like there's a world that you can go and just
Hmm.
go have fun with your friends. But then on the other hand, there's also the like, now they're just getting sucked into sort of like super nerdy reference, but like Sword Art Online, which is an anime about characters who get stuck in a video game and it becomes
Hmm.
problematic. But like, there's the other line of just getting sucked into, you forget about the real world and
Yeah.
now all you care about is the video game.
Yeah. So I want to touch on that thing that you mentioned just a little bit earlier about having played with parents or talking with the parents about the game that you're playing. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
that was an awesome thing for me whenever I was younger. Is my dad used to play these, first person shooter games like a Call of Duty or something. We'd play like a co op thing. So we're like having fun together, not really competing or anything like that. I started kind of like being competitive in games once I was kind of like a young teenager. And I even told
Sure.
my parents at some point, I was like, I kind of would be interested in, maybe going pro in this game, or if I put a little more time in, I could stream it. And they
They
were
were
like,
like, stay in
no, I
school,
don't think
son.
so. Yeah, they were like, nah, there's no chance. And even a
Looking
couple
out. They're
years,
looking out.
yeah, a couple years after that, my dad actually told me, he was like, man, I'm sorry that I kind of shut that down. Like,
Aww.
I didn't realize like how big it was because now he's super
Sure.
into his VR headset and he pays attention to the things that are like,
That's
wow, this is like
true.
huge. And a lot of that is coming to the mainstream of like, oh man, there are these huge streamers of like a Ninja for Fortnite, for instance, where I was like, oh man, he's like a huge name. Like a lot of people know him now all of a sudden. And so my dad after that was like, man, I didn't realize that this was like a possibility that you wanted to kind of invest your time in to actually try and get something out of it.
That is
Um,
legitimate in some ways.
yeah, like I genuinely
Which
wanted
is
to kind of
crazy to me
pursue
because I
something.
completely understand that. Like,
Yeah,
that the idea of pursuing becoming a professional game. I don't remember. Whatever. A
yeah, an
professional
esports
gamer or
player.
whatever. Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah.
That is. Oh, wait, let's take a turn real quick. Because it is a legitimate path as far as there are actual monetary returns and things that could
Mhm.
sort of like set you up. But at the same time, as I ranted to you about a week or so ago, the number of hours that professional esports players, that's the word, um, are just sitting on their butts in front of a screen, staring at the screen in front of them and becoming somewhat desensitized to a lot of different things. That also feels rather unhealthy.
Yeah. One thing I was going to mention with that last part was like, I remember I used to play Need for Speed with my dad, and it was an awesome way to connect.
Right.
But yeah, taking a turn into kind of the, I guess like kind of talking about the line or where it kind of becomes too much in a sense.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what you're pointing towards. I think for a lot of people, they look at it as an investment of time of like, oh, I'm spending this time to do this so I can get better and like improve my rank in these different things. Um,
Sure.
I've almost fallen into this place sometimes too with the game that I was playing Overwatch, where I was always thinking about plays in my head, and I was like, "Man, how could I have redone that? And like, what do I need to tell my team? All these things." And even in my sleep, sometimes I was sitting the game and I was like going through it, and I could remember it, and I was like, "What in the world? Like, this is too much."
Yeah, that
Um,
feels like too much. Although to be fair, you were coaching a team, but at the same time, that feels like too much.
yeah, because I was playing like these tournaments where it was like, there's not much money on the line, but that sense of pride of like, I've spent the time, and this is what I have out of it. That's where
Mhm.
it can get a bit dangerous too with the competitive side of things, is feeling like you need a return on your investment. So you keep on working in a sense of like, oh man, I really want that return. So I must have to keep on working harder. I haven't gotten
Right.
it yet since I haven't worked hard enough. And so you get into this repetitive cycle where it is that sort of day in and day out thing, and you're obsessing over it. But also, like you said, kind of forgetting the different things that are going on. For a lot of those people that are gamers, they find their community in games and find that competitive sense in games. And so they don't really have a whole lot of community outside of that, or nothing that's truly like meaningful to them. But that's the way they might interact with people and how they might find new people. Like for me,
Mhm.
I didn't have many friends. Like I was a pretty antisocial, not antisocial, but a really introverted person, anxious. So I
In
found somebody that I
college,
could
you
play
had
games with.
friends.
I'm talking about more in like middle school or high school,
Oh.
um, where
Hmm.
I found somebody. He was this guy from Florida, originally born in Venezuela, and I love playing games with him. I played with him for like some like 8 years or something. So when we started playing, we were super young. Like I was maybe like 14, he was 12 or something, and we just that was our friendship. And it kind of went past the game in a sense of me like knowing what was going on in his life and stuff. Um, and I love that. But within the world of gaming, that's a difficult thing to find. And the amount of time that people put in to find something like that, they're often striving, for drug abuse. People often say that you're kind of like going after the rabbit or going down the rabbit hole because
Hmm.
you're chasing that high of what happened. And so you're looking for that high of that, or like the high of winning these really awesome games at these tournaments, or even just
Right.
seeing that rank on your screen. You're like, I worked for that. Um, but yeah, like I said, it can be an obsession, and it can be something where you're looking for your value and satisfaction in that, but it's not something that I can provide unless you almost go like deeper and deeper. And so your dopamine like response gets confused because it's like, day in and
Right.
day out, we weren't meant to play these things that were like constantly giving us dopamine. And so once we release ourselves of that, we are very like very much so in a downturn where we're like, man, nothing's giving me that same impact as that game that I was playing.
Hmm.
Or you might feel like, man, I feel like I'm gonna lose my skill if I start playing things like that.
Oh my.
Yeah, I
Okay,
know.
so I know, you kind of already touched on, I mean, bringing up sort of the comparison to, you know, drugs, which again, the fact that you can have a conversation about gaming and refer to drugs as being some form of comparison feels problematic. But something that I was thinking on even as you were talking is that so far we've touched on gaming having an element of escapism, having an element of massive dopamine boosts, having an element even of seeking community, right? And also in some degrees it being isolating at
Mhm.
the same time. Which just makes me think of, you know, how do you walk and how do you maintain, since this podcast is the beauty in between. So I definitely don't just want to be like, all gaming is bad. I can't even say that
Mhm.
because I play games. Um, but at the same time, how can someone approach gaming and
Mhm.
like wider gaming culture and sort of stare it in the face and be like, there are parts of this that are wildly problematic, that are even designed genuinely to, it doesn't just get people hooked and addicted. It
Mhm.
also is doing something, it's setting the norms. And I'm not a neurologist, so I know that I'm going to get things wrong. But the general idea is that with so much dopamine overload, at some point it's starting to change the brain chemistry in the gamers who play. It's changing what is an acceptable level
Mhm.
of dopamine and also serotonin, much less any other hormones. If you're starting to put more and more and more time into it, similarly to how porn also affects brain chemistry while at the same time hooking and like drawing people into it because they need to
Mhm.
get their next hit or whatever. It reminds me of that. Um, but how do you stare gaming culture in the face and still like sit down at your PC or your console or whatever and decide, I know what the dark sides of this can be and what they are, but I'm still going to participate, but in a self aware, healthy way. Like, how do you do that?
I would say a lot of it is how you curate what you interact with in the game. So, like for instance, there are some people they are super negative all the time. I'm like, man, I can't play with this person. So some of these people
Mm-hmm.
I don't play with. Some of them I think like, oh, I can help them like look at it from a positive angle and like to help them out. Um, and then to help me out to enjoy it more because nobody wants to play in a negative environment. And so that's
In
one of
real
the
life or in games.
yeah. And so you
It
kind of
carries over. Yeah.
are able to curate what you're interacting with. So like certain streamers, or a fair amount of streamers, it's like, man, I don't want to be that person. So it probably isn't good for me to like,
Mm-hmm.
watch that person or listen to that person.
There are
Um,
streamers who are famous for throwing tantrums.
yeah, like the
Excuse
desk
me.
smashers and
And
stuff.
others. Yeah.
That's not what I want. And
Mm-mm.
there are a fair amount of people that will be super negative streaming the game. And I'm like, man, I don't want to, whenever I load up the game, I don't want to be like, oh man, it's going to be another tough day on the job of Overwatch or these other games. Like,
Right.
that's not good. Like, you're coming to games for the fun. That is the original idea. And so
Mm-hmm.
we've strayed a lot from that idea, and people haven't figured out how to adapt to that to actually like come back to that core value of like, it's supposed to be fun. Like, it's supposed to be a group activity where we're enjoying each other's company or we're enjoying playing this game for how like rich it
It's
is and how
supposed to
amazing.
be.
Um,
Yeah. And how much
and
heart the designers and everybody put into it.
Yeah. And so we've strayed away from that. And people, we need to help ourselves remember those things by being like, hey, like this game's not perfect, but I'm going to enjoy it for what like what I enjoy. And if you don't like a game, stop playing it. It's kind of as simple as that sometimes, but that's even a difficult thing in and of itself. Because like I said about that investment that you feel like you made.
Right.
But yeah, if it's not something that you feel like is an interesting or enjoyable thing that is a positive value to your life, then maybe it's a good time to look at it and say, am I spending too much time? Is this not what I should be playing? Um, and maybe you got to try out new things. Like that's always a safe bet. And so yeah, I think kind of looking at it from a little bit of a further out view, curating your content that you're seeing, and then also inviting other people into it and kind of changing your mindset around it. Like, for instance, there are some people that I play with, they're not as good at the game. And like, that's completely fine. The idea of it is I'm not necessarily looking to win all the games. That's not what I'm coming for. And
Mhm. You
so
don't play Fortnite with me to win, even though we do
yeah,
sometimes.
I play to have fun and like it's an interesting way to like communicate and to kind of like have
Yeah.
fun time with my wife or with other friends.
Hmm.
And so I think a lot of it comes back to looking at, like I said, that old value of like, I'm coming to have fun and not looking to get something out of it, such as, oh, I'm looking to feel that competitive win or that kind of dopamine gain. Like, if we come to it looking for something, we're going to be relying on it for all of these different things. And that's not a healthy thing, nor is it a sustainable thing. Um, because, games will change here and there. And you have to be able to say, okay, I have a life outside of it where I can find all of these things. And so
Hmm.
I'm not coming to games to fulfill that sense of community, that sense of enjoyment, that sense of value, that sense of accomplishment. I cannot come to games with that. And we need to look at it ourselves and say, is that what's happening? If so, something has gone wrong. And I'm no longer playing it for what I wanted.
Hmm. Okay, so I did just think of one more question. I want to give you the opportunity to sort of pause and just directly speak to the gamers who may be listening, and gamers as in like our friends who game sometimes, or like younger, teenagers, college students who maybe care about it more than I do, at least.
Mhm.
Um, Something that I noticed when I was working with teenagers more as a youth pastor and teacher, specifically working with teenagers who, were professing Christians and believers and whatnot. And there's this weird duality that I would hear them talk about and sort of struggle with about, when you put on the gaming headset and get into comms for whatever game. Let's use Fortnite as an example because it's so wide. It has such a vast array of people. Um, that, when they step into the game,
Mhm.
it's not like they're physically thinking about the fact of, oh, I'm a representative of Christ or whatever. They're like, I'm here to shoot the other players and win, and that's the point. So if someone is hindering that, get the heck out of my way.
Mhm.
And it's so, the landscape that they step into, it feels so disassociative and isolating and extreme. Of like, when you put on the headset, it's like you're hearing F-bombs flying every which way. There's even some like demeanors change where maybe they cuss a ton. Just as an example, cussing is a whole other thing, but I just mean it's something very obvious and pertinent, of like the way in which they speak to other human beings is just so radically different in the
Mhm.
game than when they go and, interact with humans in any in-person
Yeah.
setting. I don't know. Just I just talk to
Yeah.
the people holding the tension between, I feel like I'm one person in a game and one person not in the game.
So I would say for those people just in general, and this is something that I have to remind myself of too. And I was watching a YouTube video of something, of somebody talking about this kind of stuff. And I left a comment on there that was like, ended it with like, you know, we're coming to have fun. We're coming to win. Like, let's have fun together. And so,
Amen.
yeah, knowing that, like, I need to remind these people, and I need to remind myself that like these people that are playing the games with, they have completely different lives than I do, and some of them have like, a huge amount going on in their lives. Maybe they're just looking for a break from things to play a game, or maybe they are that person who's playing 24/7. And these people come with all different things to the gaming culture, to this game. And so remembering that like people are coming from all different places. And maybe this person is like having a terrible day and they just want to play a game and like forget about stuff. Maybe they're having a bad day in the game and they're like, oh man, I'm doing so poorly. And yeah, just not reinforcing that negative culture. Um and so like, sometimes people want to call out stuff. So seeing it in like a healthy way and trying to be almost even like a good communicator within the game. Um, and knowing,
Right.
like you said, we are representative of Christ, but also, like I said, all these people have different lives outside of it, and they're all made in God's image. So
Mhm.
let's like help reinforce something that's healthy, that's enjoyable. It's almost like a Mahatma Gandhi thing of like, be the change you want to see in the world. Like
Mhm.
that's what I want to be as a gamer, is help bring people together, help have fun. And so, like, if we have the chance to do that, why not be that person? And if somebody is just being super toxic, like maybe just disengage with them and say, hey, or not even saying something, but even just like turning them off. And you're like, I
Yep.
don't, this is not helpful to me. And
Yep.
also, if you've lost that enjoyment, like if you are burnt out on games like I kind of am sometimes, try something new. If you want to get that competitive thing and you're like, man, I feel like I'm wasting time, like look for something outside of that. What are different sports, maybe even something you played in high school or middle school that you can get involved with? You
Go
know,
touch grass.
yeah, really. Because I think a lot of people too come to games with the um, feeling of unfulfillment or sadness. Like I came to it a fair amount of times whenever I felt depressed and whenever I was really anxious and was like, man, it's so hard to interact with these people. Um, and then coming for that sense of enjoyment. Like we come looking for these things, but a lot of times we come to games because we're in an unhealthy place already. And that is almost always going to reinforce that sense. I would find myself super depressed and I didn't know what to do. Like I felt like I wasn't getting enjoyment out of anything. And so I went to games and was like, I can still stay in my room and kind of be in my little bubble. I
It's
won't bother
convenient.
anybody. Yeah, and
Hmm.
it's just right there. And so it's so easy to do that and to find yourself in an even deeper place because now you've put all these things in your life to the side. You're not dealing with anything. You're not looking for community because you think you found it there. But we can't really look for anything in the video games that we play. People can enjoy them, and I don't think there should be shame surrounding enjoying video games because you can waste your time in a bunch of different ways. And you know, people just want to
Uh-huh.
have a break from stuff. And I don't think it's
Totally.
unhealthy to look for that, but you do have to look at it from that perspective, like I said, of knowing that people are coming in with different things and trying to be a positive impact. Because if you have the chance, why not?
Right. Right. Okay. You can add anything else that you want to hear, but I think that's a really good place to sort of land the plane. But feel free to share any closing thoughts, but also what would you say is the invitation here as far as interacting with games, gamers, and gaming culture?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would encourage people to take a look at what they've been doing and know that change is possible, in the way that they speak and stuff and how they look at the game. And like I said, explore other things out there, whether it's getting something, joining a club, or for instance, we're in like a little pickleball league and just play some volleyball today. Like, look for different things that are outside of it, experiment with your life. And I would say also for those who are partners of gamers or parents of gamers, it is, I would really encourage people to and invite people to ask these, family members or whoever they might be or the spouse, like why they play games. If you are frustrated with the fact that, they might be playing games too much or they're getting really riled up and you don't like what they, kind of sound like or look like during it, communicate with them and say, hey, here's a concern that I have, but also seek to understand, like Katie was talking about, and like I was talking about earlier. It's a way for parents to connect with their kids, and a way for spouses to connect if you want to go that route. But even if not, listening to them and being a hearing ear and saying like, oh, I don't have any idea what's happening, but what's going on in the game? Like, how are your games today? I think is a great thing to do, and to also understand why is this person playing games. If you feel frustrated with the fact that like, man, I don't feel like they're spending enough time with me, or I feel like they, put games in front of me or whatever it might be. Understand why they're doing that and what they're seeking out or what they might feel is missing from their lives. Because usually we're trying to compensate for something, whether we like it or not. As humans, we want to be in a comfortable state. And so we try to compensate for different things with something that's comfortable. Games can be comfortable. So help understand and help them, move forward or whatever it might be. Help them enjoy it even more.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think what I'm really sitting with after this conversation is thinking about those of us who are um outside of, being identified as a gamer. Like, for example, I have played games and I do play games, but I don't feel like I'm quite in the gamer
Mhm.
category. So for those of us who are outside of that category, I feel like there's an opportunity of sorts to um re-engage or almost reignite with the heart of gaming, as far as it being fun and it being something that we can do together. Is like, I'm thinking back to when I was in junior high, and sometimes I would go over to my best friend's house and he would be playing games that he was much better than me at, and it was like a story based one player game, so we didn't like trade off me playing it and then him playing it like he
Mhm.
cared about where he was in
Sure.
his game. But it was enjoyable for me, genuinely, to go over after school and like watch him be good at the game, but also like participate in some ways in the game with him. Like, there was a way to connect with my
Yeah.
friends even if I wasn't necessarily playing the game itself. Like, I'm thinking of so many different games. Even when we talk, sometimes you'll ask me if I've played a game or if I've heard of it or something,
Mhm.
and sometimes I've never played that game, but
Sure.
I've sat and hung out with my friends while they play the game, and
Yeah.
I enjoy and experience the game. I think there's something to be said here about I don't like balance, but of sort of doing the dance of like being engaged. So for those of us who aren't gamers, who either are spouse of a gamer, parent, sibling, whatever, that there are still ways to sort of participate in that world without knowing everything. And then on the other hand, for the gamers, to remember that there is a world that you are actually living in with your actual body that you should be prioritizing, and that there's a way to
Yeah.
sort of bridge those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes me feel a lot better about at least a part of gaming.
Yeah, and I would say just don't treat it like a taboo subject. People know that there's toxicity
Yeah.
and stuff in games.
Yeah, I feel like
People
no
know
one
that
knows how to talk about this.
people
No,
know that
no
they can get
believers know
obsessed.
how to talk about this.
Yeah, and some like, spouses or parents or anything might be like, I have no clue how to do this, so I'm just gonna like let them go. We'll see what happens. If it's bad, I'll try to
Right,
scale it
right.
back. But yeah, I would encourage you, discuss it with your kid or with your spouse. Um, and for a lot of people, like it's treated as a taboo subject of like, oh, like, games are just like a waste of time. That's kind of what people have been told.
Right.
Um, but the reality is, like, a lot of these people want something from games, and they might get it, they might not, but it's good to
But it's a
understand the
game.
reasons why. Yeah, and
Right.
you know, people sometimes it is good for them to play this game, and sometimes they are having fun. Like back whenever I was playing the release of Overwatch 2, I was like getting these pug nights open, and I was like had a
Oh
Discord, and all these
yeah.
people were playing together. But it was awesome because when these people were playing against each other, they knew who they were playing against, and so they knew every face on the side of the screen, and like we would tease each other, we would have fun, like we would make it more difficult for ourselves sometimes, and it was fun because we knew those people who we were playing with. And
Totally.
so we've
Yep.
strayed away from that
Yep.
with playing on our own against or with these random people we don't really
Right.
know. Um, but for spouse, for instance, like maybe it is good for your guy to play games, and I think like it's treated as like an island as a subject, and
Mm-hmm.
men have these different obsessions. They could be all sorts of things, whether they're like, oh
Uh-huh.
man, I love my yard, or I love like building this shed, or oh man, I love watching one of our relatives, like he loves watching tank videos and these people rebuilding tanks.
Ah, yes, I love these cisgendered stereotypical norms.
Yeah, so there's all these different things that like people can obsess over. So like a
Yeah.
baseball or football, like I'm not into those, but I'm into the esports. And
Right.
so that sounds super nerdy and it's like kind of coming around now, but don't treat it as like a completely different subject where it's like, oh man, you can
Totally.
spend your time, you know, watching the NFL all the time when they're on and making all these fantasy leagues. Like, to be honest, that can be just as much of an obsession where you're checking your score, checking your
100%.
players.
Gambling, also a
Yeah. Yeah. You
problem.
could be betting on the games and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
you're so right.
And, people
Yes.
pay to watch these different events that are happening because they're super hyped for it. And they might have a bunch of
Right.
guy friends come over who are so excited with them. And so,
Right.
some
Which in
wives
those
have,
moments, that's great.
yeah,
Yeah.
some wives and husbands have found ways to be like interested in the sport that their significant other is into. Like you're into
Mhm.
fencing. I have no idea about fencing, but so we'll
But I
sit
was
down and
explaining
watch
it
it
to
with
you.
you. And if you wanted to have a party over a fencing tournament, well, let's do it. Or if somebody wanted to have
Right.
a like football party and the spouse was like, I have no idea, but I'll be here with you and like let's do this
Mhm.
together. It can extend outside of the gaming realm. And so, yeah, looking at, what we can get out of it and not treating it as something that is completely different than all these other obsessions.
That's a
I
really
think
good reminder.
nice way. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to leave it at that then, if you're okay with that. That
Yeah.
is such a great reminder. It almost makes me want to text some of our friends and see if they want to play a game with us later. But that being said, thank you for joining us for this conversation,
Yeah.
everyone. For those of you who are still hanging out with us right now, it is genuinely so helpful if you leave a review with words on Apple Podcasts. And just wherever you listen to our podcast. And one more time, I've mentioned this in the beginning, that if you join the Chasing Justice Patreon community, which is linked in our show notes, if you join it, that actually directly supports us and our ability to produce
Hmm.
this podcast and to be able to keep going. So it directly supports us and is genuinely very helpful. So for those of you who've already jumped over to supporting us on Patreon, we really appreciate it. For those of you that could do $1 or $5, believe it or not, that is actually really impactful.
Yeah.
So please consider it. It would help us a lot. And otherwise, we love y'all and happy August. Bye.
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody. So, hey, everybody, again, I just wanted to put a little tidbit in here that, like I said, I'm a gamer myself. So, if you're a gamer out there looking for some fun people to play with, I would love to play with you. Like I said, I am a bit competitive, but I love interacting with different people and being able to learn and everything and just having fun together. So, would love to connect with you if you have, a name on these like Discord or on the different games. Or if you have a favorite game that you want to talk about, feel free to comment down below. We'd love to interact with y'all and to
Mhm.
know our audience better. And so, talking about this specific conversation, how many are here to listen? So is Katie.
And
So,
feel free to click through Gabe's Instagram. You can send him a DM. I'm
yeah,
very pro finding gaming buddies for my husband. So hit him up. Do it.
yeah,
Or hit me up and
I
I
had
will
that.
do it for you.
Sorry, I had that old Discord, and then I also have some old stream clips on there. Disregard those if you go to my Instagram profile. Just know that they're there. That I do actually play games quite often, but know that that is me trying to be a streamer, and that is a weird spot. Maybe later. Maybe later. Maybe I'll make it to Discord.
Anyway, on that note, hit him up, play games with my husband.
Join us on the journey.
If you wanna have a good time on Fortnite, but maybe not win, hit me up. And that's all we got. All right.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thank
y'all.
y'all.